Did you know that 55% of millennials have no retirement whatsoever? I get it, because my retirement situation is kind of a mess too. Let's talk about how much you should have saved and what to do if you're behind. I am right there with you. This is not going to be one of those things where I'm looking down on anybody who's behind in retirement, because my retirement story is far from straightforward. There's lots of twists and turns. So I grew up in a working class family in the Maine woods. My dad was a construction worker, and in rural Maine, there aren't a ton of jobs that are high paying. A lot of people who grow up in Maine will go to school out of state, most commonly in Boston, and then they'll find some kind of big city job somewhere else that pays well. I didn't leave Maine right at college age. I stayed there for a while, for better or for worse, and I worked a series of low-paying jobs. For a while, I was a cashier in a dollar store. I also worked in housekeeping, cleaning hotel rooms. Oh, the things I've seen, the things I've seen. And then my first steady job that was full-time with benefits was at the Borders bookstore in Bangor, Maine. Anyway, this was back in the early 2000s. Gives you a clue about my age. I'm an older millennial. I'm on the older end of things for the millennial generation. And at the time I was making $7.11 an hour. I had health insurance. It was a tough job. Borders was cool for retail, but it was still retail. Customers were Karens and looking down and shaking their finger, and you're on your feet all day. $7.11 an hour. They had a program where I could contribute to my 401k. I was able to put away some money. I didn't have very much money at all, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to suffer for this. I want to put some away for my retirement. So I put some into the 401k and I just kind of let it sit. And it wasn't a huge amount, but it was more than nothing. Borders was going through a lot of economic difficulty at that point. Amazon had sprung up. So because of the financial difficulties, we were being stretched even thinner. There were all kinds of strange corporate mandates. It was becoming less and less like a cool place to work, like Borders was, and more like, your typical sales job. And I, at the time, was in charge of a bunch of things, but I was sorting medical reference because it was a section that nobody wanted to do, to be honest. And I got really into reading all these medical reference books. I was really fascinated by it. I kind of put two and two together, and I realized that there was a program at the community college near me for an associate's in applied science in medical transcription. And it wasn't going to be easy, but I figured out that I could afford the tuition if I took out some small loans and worked part-time while I was in school. I was able to find some part-time work at the school, actually. So what I did at the school was I tutored in math, because I'm quite good at math, and I also had a job working at the campus library part-time as the library aide. So that was really cool. I did that, and I had a bunch of things going for me. I was actually awarded a scholarship to go. I was a Pell Grant recipient because I was low income. Took a bunch of credits. I graduated top of my class. I had a 4.0. My last year of community college, I worked as an intern at a transcription firm right in my town, and they hired me right out of school. And the thing about medical transcription is that it is production-based pay. So the faster and more efficient you were at your job, provided you met stringent quality standards, the more you made. And I was a fiend. I used a lot of expander programs. I could just put things in and I'd be typing, my normal 120 words a minute, and it would come out 250, 300 words a minute. And I was very good at the medical knowledge. It was really quick. So I started making really good pay. This was 2004, 2005. At that point, I was making $65,000 at home in my pajamas with an associate's degree. That was pretty cool. The issue was that my now husband was not good with money at all. So once I started making better money, he started trying to find a way to spend it. I've actually gone into detail about some of the things he did in another video about the worst financial mistake I ever made, which I will link if you want to watch that one after this. But the long and the short of it was that he didn't work, and even though my pay had gone up dramatically, he started spending a lot more money. He would spend money as fast as it could come in. I basically had to do things where I hid the money for our bills so that he wouldn't spend it. That's the kind of situation I was in. And I was so busy working and trying to make more money to be productive that it was hard to keep an eye on him. Plus I was doing all the chores and all that because he did not clean. That's not a thing he did. So anyway, when I started making that $65,000, my employer at the time had a very generous match. It was either 1 or 1.5 times match up to the first 4 or 5%. You'll have to forgive me, it's been 20 years. But I was like, yeah, okay, because I went to this benefits seminar and they talked to us about the importance of compounding interest. So one cool thing is that I had one that was basically based on my age. So as I got older, it would change the risk strategies. So when I was younger, it would do things that were riskier because I had time to recover. As I'm getting older, that profile is getting a little bit more risk averse, shall we say. But I was able to get all that risky payoff and all that compounded interest for 20 years. I went full tilt on this. It was another way to hide money from my now ex-husband, spoiler, who was going crazy with the money. So I put quite a bit of money into this account. I worked at that position as a transcriptionist for 6 years. And then the Affordable Care Act came in, and a lot of what I was doing as a transcriptionist was labeled as healthcare excess spending and waste, like inefficiency. The idea was, why do you need to pay somebody in the US to type things out, wholesale, when you could have, basically AI, as it were, back then, 15 years ago, do the voice recognition of your work, and then have the transcriptionist, me, go in and become an editor and change it. Now, the problem was they decided it was easier for us to do this, and so they changed our line rate to like a quarter. It was really bad because if you're a good transcriptionist like I was, I could type documents faster than I could edit garbage that AI had spat out. So the whole industry changed. By this point, I had moved cross country, divorced, remarried, done a whole bunch of other things. And I had always been really interested in psychology from the charts I did. Went back to school. I went to a 4-year school this time, but it was a public school. And again, I had scholarships, I worked as a tutor, and one of the neat things was my school would charge you for a full-time schedule. There was like a bulk price for that, and it was the same price whether you were taking 12 credits or 20 or 24 credits. So I would take between 20 to 24 credits a semester, and basically all my gen eds transferred in from the community college. A lot of my transcription and disease processes and pathophysiology and A&P sorts of classes, they were only worth so much in a general bachelor's context, but I was still able to graduate within 2 years because I was going double time. So I did that. And obviously during that time period, I wasn't able to contribute to my 401k. It just kind of sat there. So I had the Borders one. Actually, this is a dirty secret. When I was in school finishing up my psychology degree, my husband, my second husband, my responsible husband, my current husband, he worked at a software firm. And his company had gotten purchased by a venture capital company. And they did some janky stuff all at once while I was in school. I had the part-time tutoring job, but I wasn't making bank, put it that way. We had a mortgage on the house. He had a house when I met him. He'd bought it when the market crashed, the 2008 crash, and he had it. It was a little house in the suburbs of Cleveland. He's a very hard worker. We both are. That's part of why I think this is a better marriage. He was in the habit of working lots of overtime, and this venture capital firm decided, okay, we're capping overtime. And at the same time they did that, they raised the cost of a health insurance plan. And this was right before we was gonna graduate. We knew we had tax return coming in the spring, and it was gonna be a good one, but there were gonna be a couple of months where it was gonna be really hard to pay the mortgage. We looked into all sorts of things. I sold off a bunch of my possessions. I had a bunch of video games that had appreciated in price, rare ones. I'm a nerd, I'm a gamer. I was able to get rid of those things I bought at yard sales and held on to. We tried to sell plasma. This is a true story. We tried to sell plasma at the blood bank, but the line was too long. They didn't need us. It was kind of a tough time. So we got to this point where it's like, how do we pay the mortgage for a couple of months while we wait on our tax return and I can graduate from school and get a job? And I did something that was kind of irresponsible. I sort of regret it now, but I also understand the kind of decision I was making at the time. I took the IRA from Borders. It was, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4K. Not nothing. Our mortgage at the time, I think, was like $1,100 a month. But I needed to pay taxes on this, right? So like about a third of whatever I was doing was gonna go away. And I cashed out the IRA from Borders. And it fixed it. It got us through to tax return time. I got hired right out of school. Wasn't the best job in the world, but it certainly helped. And A bunch of things went right. We kept being upwardly mobile. We never had trouble paying mortgage on the house again. I had my 401k from my transcription job from the hospital that was ginormous for me at that time, and doing its thing. I left that alone, and I ended up graduating in under 2 years and landing a job at a psychological consulting firm, which was really cool. It was actually in my field. And they had a retirement plan. It was a little skimpy because the company was a small business, so it didn't have kind of the backing that some of the larger retirement plans have, but I was able to do an IRA there. They had a 50% match up to 2%, I wanna say. I contributed for the 3 years that I worked there. I've told the story of how that ended in another video, which I will link about how that job ended. But essentially, at a certain point, I went into business for myself because it became evident that I could make a lot more money and be a lot happier if I worked for myself. And I did that. I have been working for myself for over 7 years now. For the first 6 months that I started the business, I was still working my full-time job, my corporate job, where I was learning and development manager at a psychological consulting firm. And I was doing my monster commute, and then I was also doing my side hustle. So I had these 70-hour weeks. I wasn't sleeping. It was crazy. Did that for about 6 months. I'd already started making a couple hundred a month passively while still working at my day job. And then it became my full-time gig, and I was able to scale it up from there. Here's the thing though, and this is kind of the dirty secret. I forgot all about retirement. I didn't think about it at all. I should have thought about this sooner. I was so laser focused on building my business and getting it so that it was profitable and sane that I didn't even think at all about my retirement. Now, my husband, he was contributing at his job and his retirement was going up. So there's a little bit of that too in my brain, but yeah, so the 7-8 years, didn't think about it. And now I'm kind of getting to the point where the business where it's like, oh, darn, I should have been tucking away 100 or 200 a month, even if it was tough in the beginning, just to have something in there. There's another factor too. I got married and divorced and remarried, so I've had a bunch of different last names, honestly. And there's a bunch of paperwork involved. I have the paperwork. I know how to do the paperwork. I've done it for things like Social Security and whatnot. But it's been just enough of a barrier that it's kind of like, eh. But the good news is for me and for you, if your retirement is a mess, it's fixable. Let's talk about numbers. So when you're talking about a guide to retirement savings, it's usually an age-based thing. You want to base it on your salary at the time, what you're earning. That's another thing. My salary has been so up and down. Like I was making 65K and then I was making minimum wage and then I was making 6 figures and minimum wage and back and forth. Like I've had a lot of fluctuations, so it's difficult. But generally speaking, these all assume that you want to retire around the age of 65 with a lifestyle that's similar to your working years, so you're not downsizing or anything. Okay, so here are the basic goals. The aim is essentially to save 10 times your salary by the time you want to retire, which is 65 or 67. So at age 25, you should have half saved of your salary. So let's say you make like 50K a year, you want to have 25K saved by age 25. At age 30, you want to have your salary 1 time. So with that 50K example, you'd want to have 50K saved by age 30. By age 35, it's 2 times your salary, so that'd be 100K for the 50K person. 40, it's 3 times, so 150. By age 45, you want 4 times your salary, so that would be 200K. Age 50, you'd want 6 times your salary, so that would be 300K. Age 55, you want 7 times your salary, that would be 350. By age 60, you would want 8 times your salary, that would be 400K. And then, 65 to age 67, you would want 10 times your salary. So that would be $500,000. Now, there's some key assumptions that are made with this. One is that you start saving in your 20s and that you invest consistently. And there's an assumption that the stock market gives you about 5 to 7% annually. It's true, sometimes you can do like a 9 to 10%. It really depends historically on what's going on. It goes up and down, but over the long term. That's just kind of a back of the envelope thing. There are a lot of factors involved, and I'll get into that in a minute. So if you're panicking as you hear these numbers, as I certainly did, we'll talk about some other ways that this isn't a hard or fast thing, because most people do not hit these numbers, and that's okay. Heck, we were just saying most millennials have nothing. There are some alternative paths here. You don't have to be perfect, you just need to have a plan. A plan sooner is better than later, but later is better than never. So let's talk about what to do if you're behind, which you probably are. I am. One thing you can do is you can consolidate and reduce fees. I am literally doing this. So I have 2 retirement accounts that are open. I have the 401k and the traditional IRA. Every account that you have has a maintenance fee, and those can vary, but they basically charge you a percentage to manage your money for you. So if you have multiple ones, you should combine them. So you just pay the one maintenance fee rather than paying it here and there, because that'll effectively double or triple or quadruple your maintenance fee if you're paying all these different ones. Now, when you're doing this, you need to be careful. So what I'm planning on doing is opening a traditional IRA, not a Roth IRA. They have different rules. With a Roth IRA, what you do is you pay the taxes now, and when you pull it out later, it's tax-free. With a traditional IRA, it's tax deductible when you are putting the money in, and you pay taxes later. You would choose a Roth IRA if you expect to be in a higher tax bracket later and you want tax-free withdrawals in retirement. This is good if you're younger and you have more time for your money to grow and you value flexibilities because you can withdraw at any time. I probably should have done that. I didn't do that.
Don't play woulda, coulda, shoulda. That's a losing game.
And you would choose a traditional IRA if you want the tax deduction now. And here's the thing, if you're behind, start now, because even small changes add up. So what I'm doing is I'm going to be starting a traditional IRA, and I'm going to roll over my other funds into it. For me, I have the business and I pay quite a few taxes because I work for myself. People who work for themselves often have to pay more taxes because they are both the business and the employee. Basically, we end up sort of double taxed. So for me, it makes sense to put it in pre-tax. It helps my tax burden. And I'm gonna start now. I'm gonna do it. I'm starting over again. I wanna get rid of those fees. Now, here's the thing. Some people wanna retire at 50, some people wanna retire at 65. My situation is actually unique. So where am I? Where should I be? Let's talk about it. So going by the guidelines for income and years, I should be at 3 times my salary. I kinda am, sort of. So I was talking about how I've made a little bit to a little bit. I have a huge range. I am actually doing really well if you take the low end, like the very low end of what I can do in business. I am behind if you take the high end of what I can do in business. So I'm doing okay. I'm not doing a terrible job because I had that money and I parked it. Could be better. Could be better, but you know what? It's been an interesting journey. At least I have something, right? Now, I'm not horrifically worried. Some people want to retire at 50. Some people want to retire a lot sooner. Some people want to retire at 65. My plan is to work until I pass away or have dementia, until I literally can't work. That's probably the best part about being in business for myself. I have a bunch of different things I do. I'm here on YouTube. I'm the author of several books. I have an e-commerce business. I'm branching out into some other stuff, some resale. I have a lot of things that I can do that depend on my mental acuity, but not necessarily my physical stamina. I've been working more with collaborators and colleagues. I'm looking to get to the point in 5 or 10 years where I have employees and I can start working more in a management capacity. My business is operating such in a way that I can work forever, and frankly, I like working. It's just a matter of what exactly I will be doing. So I'm not going to be going to zero. I have that flexibility in my work so that I can work. So I'm less freaked out, and also my husband's on pace for him. So it kind of works out really well. And I think that's the case with people who have passive income from entrepreneurship. They have that flexibility. They can work longer in a safe, sane way rather than the grind, right? Because the reality is there are different paths to financial freedom. You don't have to quit at 65 if you don't want to. And if you can find some other way, some other flexible work. I know lots of people that even just have greeter jobs and things like that. Their retirement isn't completely funded by their investment portfolios. For example, my mom literally went and got a job because she was lonely after my dad passed. And it helps with her for income and stuff. And because she doesn't strictly need the job for her basic necessities, like her house is paid for, she's mostly getting it for fun money and the stimulation. If it gets to be a hassle, she can quit. That's such a different thing. So for her, she likes it. She gets out and she makes friends and she talks to people and has a little fun money. So don't freak out too much if you're not making those, because at the end of the day, retirement isn't a number, it's a strategy. And there are all different ways to make this work. Anyway, it's been great talking to you as always. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.